Alexa, 5-minute timer. So shaking helps my lymphatic system, helps my joints, helps my muscles. Why wouldn't it help the brain? And it turns out it does. Consistent shaking will tend to emphasize your parasympathetic over your sympathetic system. There's a corresponding response in your brain in terms of astrocyte response. So astrocytes are these star-like cells that cover neurons and protect them. They can provide or take away nutrients. They can take away waste product. They can also attenuate firing if necessary. So they're kind of like a control mechanism that also provides safety and structure. Sometimes they're being used up, A1, so fight or flight mode. A2 mode is when they're more repairing, restoring. Again, sympathetic, parasympathetic, A1, A2. Interestingly, this measurement, and it's actually astrocytic calcium fluctuation. So the variance in that is corresponding with also heart rate variability. And it makes sense because we've got complex systems, and both of those things are really measurements of noise over time. And these complex systems actually thrive on noise at a deep level. So the fact that noise is the common thread between those things isn't a very surprising thing. The thing that surprised me, though, is what I'm doing right now, shaking, is mechanical noise. The act of shaking, what I'm doing right now, increases fluctuations in astrocytic calcium levels. I'm not sure if levels is the right word. I'm not exactly sure how to phrase that exactly. But this activity I'm doing right now, much like it helps my joints, much like it helps my lymphatic system move stuff through the system, it builds resilience in my brain. And what that really means in a practical basis is you're going to be able to concentrate more. It's going to help your executive function. Now, that's a bit of an overstatement. So realistically, there are at least 5 categories or 5 regions of the brain and also the spinal cell where these cells exist. And so different activities will stimulate different ones. So I believe if you consider there's a verbal cortex, you can stimulate these through verbal kinds of activities. So I would guess that the eye leading motion like this, where you're moving your eyes and coordinating your head motion with your eye motion, is likely something that's going to, much like shaking, increase the astrocyte calcium fluctuations in your eye sockets. Eye sockets is the wrong place, but in your, I would guess, your visual cortex as a guess. If you're doing physical kinesthetic things, proprioceptive things, I would guess, though I don't know, hippocampus, especially if it involves spatial reasoning. I'm just guessing, but I believe there's like 5 categories that have been identified, and each one of those have an A1 and A2 response. So at a high level, there's 2 modes of operation: repair, protection, and repair, or I guess rest and repair. So you want to switch between those 2. Neither one is right or wrong. You need both. You need A1 mode for acute pain, acute injury, and also just for high stress situations. If you're at a high stretch, you need to get more energy going in, and so that's gonna happen. So in fact, if you're sitting in fight or flight mode all day long, you're sitting at your desk, you're compressing your vagus nerve, you're agitated, you're concentrating, and so on. You're drinking coffee. You're probably going to be stimulating the A1 mode, and you're taking reserves. You need to build reserves up. Sleep does that. Especially, I believe, I would guess, though I don't know this, I'm making a leap here, but I would suspect that if you have a consistent sleep schedule, that kind of repair is going to really be accelerated during the first few hours of sleep when the deep repair really happens. So that's why often even if you sleep the same amount of time, but you shift it by 2 hours from your normal, you don't get the same amount of rest. It's not the same quality rest, and that's because your body's been set up. As I've said a million times, your body responds to how you work with it. So if you get a schedule and then you break that schedule, the body's going to suffer. I normally don't shake for 5 minutes, so I'm going to work on a new protocol. It's going to start with 5 minutes of just sort of chill, heart rate variable monitoring. With that, I'm going to use a polar chest strap and their heart rate variability software. Then I'll do 5 minutes of shaking. Sorry, then I'll do the measurement, 5 minutes of shaking, and then immediately to check the response, I'll do another HRV measurement. And in theory, I should see an improvement. And over time, I should see an improvement in the baseline as well as the higher value. And according to the research I've done and research AI, the amount of improvement should be, I would guess, higher, Alexa, stop, higher than the likely variance introduced by time of day and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to start working on like normalizing variables so there's a chance that I can actually see a trend. There's actual direct measurements of these things. So these are not just hypotheticals. These can be measured. There's two levels of measurement. One costs around $10,000 and it involves a functional MRI scan, I believe. Another one's around $25,000. And since I'm just dabbling, I'm not going to do that. Okay, anyway, I just wanted to stretch. Sorry, I just wanted to shake tonight. I'm not going to do the neck isometrics because I haven't got a lot of time and I want to emphasize stretching. So I'm going to start by working on my front here a little bit. I'm going to put my knees together, feet apart, and I'm just going to sort of allow myself to stretch my thighs, stretch my knees. So this is hyperflexing my knees. When you flex, you close. That's flexing, that's extending. So when I fold forward, that is closing those joints, flexing. When I arch back, it's extending. On this, what I'm doing here is I'm working on my front so I can do better back bends. That's often the case. You push on your right side, you feel it on the left. You stretch your front, it makes your back more pliable and vice versa. If you're tight in the front, it reflects to the back. So I sit all day, I tighten my hip flexors, I stand up, my hip flexors have been shortened over years, and so they pull this way. I have to pull back to open up and straighten my posture, or not. If I don't, I may not straighten my posture, which means then instead I'll lean forward and eventually I'll screw up my hip flexors. They'll get even shorter, and then I'll be in a walker. And I know I'm talking about extreme, but I'm getting close to 60. I got to worry about that stuff. You may not be close to 60, but you know what? You still have to worry about that stuff, and better to stop making your body worse now. Few simple practices. Having said that, it doesn't take a lot of time, but it takes consistency. And the reason for that is the body responds to change really well, but it just takes time. And that's because there's a survival bias. So while we could be more responsive to change, if we do so, that would be at the expense of possibly responsiveness for survival need. And so that's why, for example, there's a sympathetic over a parasympathetic dominance. And that's because genetically, those who had a parasympathetic dominance and had enemies didn't survive. So that's just an example of what's going on. I've lost my train of thought. I think the sloth got me somewhere. So anyway, this propensity or preference towards sympathetic is most likely a survival bias, and we can counteract that through our intention. Right? You can, for example, I get to a discomfortable position, and then I relax a little bit. The body gives in a little bit. I get a little more discomfortable, and then the body relaxes. I'm going to actually adjust just a touch here. And my autonomic system doesn't want to do what I'm doing right now. My body is giving me these signals. Hey, what are you doing? You sure you want to do this? So I'm not going to say pain. It's not pain. I mean, it is technically pain, but pain is a signal. It's not good. It's not bad. Excessive pain or pain that is not associated with, say, some kind of acute injury, that is chronic pain, that's not good. But right now, the kind of pain I'm sensing is primarily informational and not needing an immediate response. My autonomic system wants a response, but I can just say, yeah, I'm not going to do it. This is okay. I'm okay with this signal. So if you need to, if something more happens, you're going to have to turn up the signal to get a response from me. So that works in both directions. And I'm just using my awareness and my intention to retune my body. Now, I'm not controlling my body. It's an influence. It's a dance. Right? My body has a way of being. And a lot of that is how I was born. They say 60%, and a lot of that's how I'm living right now. But over time, you can definitely change the shape of your body. It's sort of like based on your genetics and your environment. You're trying to steer a boat, but your genetics sort of set the initial size of the boat, and then over time, depending on how you choose your intention, you might be able to either improve the steering of the boat or maybe even get a smaller boat that is more responsive in general. So, for example, I lost a lot of weight. My body became a lot more responsive. But then I started pushing it through stretching, and my body became a lot more supple. And also, it allowed me to do better control of qigong and tai chi, which allowed me to get better internal sense of my body, which actually improved my proprioception and my interoception, which improved my neuroplasticity and has been feeding back into a circle. And so, a little plus a little plus a little plus consistency over time makes profound change possible. Now, I've got to listen to the signals in my body. This is a bit much. So my knees are raising off the ground. I don't want my knees off the ground, but if I just sit here for just a few moments, this will calm down and maybe my knees will lower. And if not, in fact, I'm going to wait. I've gone too quickly. I'll do that instead. So that's an example of where I was listening to the pain and I was like, nope, you know what? The pain is telling me this is just a little too much. I need to back off. If I stay here for a few moments, when I lay back, I'll be able to do it. Patience. Slow is healing. Fast is revealing. Much better. It's still uncomfortable, but it's an entirely different kind of discomfort. If I had tried to do this from the beginning, I would have really I wouldn't have hurt myself. My body would have just said, nope, would have shut down, which is something that the astrokines do. If you're firing too much, they can shut down or attenuate. So what I'm actually doing is I'm doing something similar. In fact, I'm mimicking, in a sense, what my autonomic system does. So when I start to use my intention to reattune my body to let it know that a certain level of discomfort is okay for the moment, I'm using the same kind of influence in a sense. It's just that it's coming from intention as opposed to an automatic response. Whew. I'm all over the place right now. Okay. So that keeps my knees nice. And that's a really good one for your knees if you can handle it. On that pose, I've been doing it for years now, so I can get my back on the ground. But that's probably only within the last 6 months. So it took me 3.5, 4 years to get to there. But use a pillow. Here's an important thing: do not consider what anyone else's pose look like. Absolutely, don't do that. It is just it's gonna do nothing but cause you angst. Now, if you are able to do a critical analysis and you can just say analysis and say I might make this and that kind of adjustment, that's fine. There is something there. There is absolute value, but really be careful about comparing yourself to somebody else. The important thing has nothing to do with what's outside of you. The important thing is what the hell are you feeling inside your body, and how can you use that information to improve whatever it is you're doing. So, for example, if you can't do this, but you can do this and you feel a stretch, you're making progress. You get to here, you're making progress. And every time you do a little bit of improvement, you're aligning the sarcomeres, you're making it easier for your body to move. You're actually reducing stress, lowering A1C. Not much, but it's nothing plus nothing, Weinberg, nothing plus nothing plus nothing eventually equals something. That can be a positive or a negative effect. And so intention plus consistency plus a little bit of discomfort is a recipe for remodeling your body. Now let's see. I haven't got a plan. Oh, yes, I did have a plan for today. I don't have much of a plan. I'm just going to do one pose. Just going to do pancake because of timing. But this is a good one. It's a big one. It's hips. And I've had a recent discovery. I used to believe in the 90s I could do the splits. I'm wrong. I wasn't doing the splits. I was doing this one. I was doing pancake. So while I'm not where I was in the 90s, um, I can see myself getting to where I was. It's still going to be a couple years, but interestingly, if you approach side splits, which this isn't really side splits, if you approach it down with your heels and you spread your heels out, it's a much deeper pose. It gets really much deeper into the back of a leg. Right here, this is much more groin. Both useful. They do complement each other, but honestly, they're not even, to me, they're almost entirely different poses at this point. Okay, so I'm just going to lean forward for a while. I'm not going to time this. I'm just going to do this for as long as I feel like doing it. Um, Normally, when you're getting started with a practice like this, use a timer. Keep track of time until you got past a phase where you've started to feel success. And so and this is a personal experience. It may not apply to you, but once I started noticing just how quickly my body was getting more flexible, I was impatient and I wanted to get on to the next pose. The problem is time is an essential aspect of this entire process. Not a lot of time, 2 to 5 minutes, but 2 to 5 minutes. And especially for hip poses, more time is better. So my impatience led to frustration or boredom, which is a classic response in the sitting meditation practice. And once I made that mental connection, I started talking to my impatience. And I actually mean that in a literal sense. Um, Sometimes I would call it Fred, just because that's the trick that I use. So if I want to externalize an internal aspect of myself, I give it a name, typically Fred. Though Fred and I have got a good relationship now, so I don't want to abuse Fred too much. But in fact, this is a manifestation of using a rubber duck to sort of process things. And I suspect that you might look at rubber ducking as some form of neuro linguistic programming, or, I mean, ritualized magic, I suppose. So the reason I was mentioning time is, uh, when you get to that phase, if you get to that phase, you need to use a timer, and you need to allow yourself to really put in the time. It's so worth it. On this pose, by the way, there's a couple. I'm going to give you a couple of tricks. One thing, I'm looking at down, but if I'm noticing a little pressure on my lower back, and right now it's a little uncomfortable the way I'm holding this, I can do two different things. Thing one, I can get my blocks, which are over there, so I'm not going to do that. Or thing two, look ahead. It's going to tend to reduce the arch in your back. And I mean, right there, I'm about as far down as I was, not feeling it in my lower back at all. So let me try this again. I'm going to come into this. I'm going to look down. I mean, I feel pulling. I'm going to put my hand where I feel the pulling. I won't be able to show you that, but I'm going to come back up. And now I'm going to go back into it, but I'm going to look forward. That's not, I mean, it's not at all the same. So this little trick, or pressure on your forehead. And I believe, I'm going to try one last thing. I mean, you got to experiment. Direct experience is how you incorporate this into just a regular practice, and you just make it just normal. So experiment, find out what works, throw away what doesn't work. But what I wonder is, can I effectively help my lower back by, if I want to look down, that's fine. Normally I would use bricks, but well, now my lower back's not giving me a problem. But I was wondering if I could just simply do something like this, put pressure on my forehead. But I'll disregard that for now. Okay, I'm going to describe a sensation. Obviously, my muscles are stretching, and I can feel that internal stretching. But there's also a sensation. Okay, I'm gonna start with the word numbness. It's not numbness. It is more desensitization. It's almost like this nervous system response is turned down a notch, which wouldn't surprise me if that's exactly what's happening. Because I'm giving a consistent signal of a certain amount of discomfort, and yet here I am accepting it. So the autonomic system's like, well, okay, I guess I'm going to have to readjust or turn up the signal, but I have no reason to turn up the signal, so it must be okay. And so I'm retuning my autonomic system. And in fact, deep flexibility is about half working with your nervous system. You can do it with your breath, and you can do it with your discomfort. Not pain, discomfort. I am absolutely not saying no pain, no gain. In fact, rather the opposite. Pain is regressive. If you go too far, your muscles go whoosh, and you completely lose the nervous system stuff, and you also possibly hurt the fibers. So pain is no gain, pain is reversal. Slow is healing. That doesn't mean don't push yourself. I guarantee you, if you go back and look at any of my videos, in many of these videos, it's very intense what I'm doing. It just is an internal experience. It's not an external experience. There's nothing symbolic about how I'm holding my hands here. I just want to point out, not that I mind. I mean, I'm mostly secular, but I'm just trying to find something symmetrical. And about 2 weeks ago, you won't be able to see this, but if you look at the tip of my thumb, there's a crater there where the cat bit off a big old chunk. It didn't. It's fine. I mean, it doesn't hurt anymore, but it. I don't want to hold pressure on it for extended periods of time yet. I can use it, but it's not. It's 80%. It's not 100% by any stretch of the imagination. There we go. That's symmetrical. That being said, uh, there are hand positions, like for example, prayer pose, specifically behind the back, is a good way to hyperflex your shoulders in a stable way. So I'm looking for forms that provide function, not symbology. Okay, that's way too much. I got to pull back just a touch. I was allowing my head to just hang without anything, and it was just a little too much on my hamstrings. This is progressive, but the progression is slow, and it's more. It's there are. I've noticed there's definitely modes of the progression. Sometimes, especially once you've been familiar with the pose, early on there's some linear progression. You can pretty much go, 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 and then it's more step progression. Go, hold, release. In a sense, now that I think about it, this is like micro PNF. You go until there's just a little pressure, hold, and then maybe relax a little bit, then go a little bit deeper. So it's minor PNF progressions as you go deeper into the pose, as opposed to a hold that attempts to cause failure, which is a different level of PNF, I guess, or it's a other side of a spectrum or a range. This is freaking intense. Oh God. Okay, I'm going to come up a little bit, and I'm going to go a little bit wider, and I'm going to go through this again. Now, I'm already actually quite debilitated in terms of I've really got my legs turned off, so I got to be careful. Holy shit. Okay, wow. Right there. That's an intense pose right here, right there. That is a lot. I'm just going to stay here and try to find a place that's stable so I can just hold this because that's pretty intense. There we go. I think that's fine. Not exactly sure how far my legs are in terms of openness. What is that, 150 degrees? It's not bad. Now, when I widen my legs, I lost the pillow under my bum, and I kind of really like that, but it's really hard for me to get this and still keep my legs. So let's see if I can do this. Okay. This is a balancing act. Okay. Okay. Nope, not centered. There we go. Now, the nice thing about that is, while it was a bit of effort, and I may have lost a little bit, I can now use gravity to do some of my work for me. So now, rather than me trying to hold myself up, I'd have to just a little bit of this pressure, very easy to hold myself, and then again, deepen the pose. Look forward to reduce the pressure on my lower back and start all over again. Oh, and I have the door closed so poor Chesh can't get in. I'll let him in a minute. Okay, I think that, I don't know how long that was, but oh, I could stay there for a while, but if I overdo it, the recovery can be a bit brutal. Oh, come on, leg, come back. There we go. Actually, I guess really that wasn't that long because my legs are not that debilitated. And I say debilitated, here's the thing. Now they're fine. That's it. That's all it takes. So when I really extend those muscles, bring them back slowly. Once they're back into sort of the opposite of what you just did, or at least back into sort of a neutral position, they go back to fine. But really, we're destabilizing the muscles if you're doing things well. You're also turning down your nervous system. So I'm not going to do anything after this other than one more stretch, supine butterfly in bed, and go to sleep with supine butterfly as a start. But I will set an alarm because I don't want to fall asleep like that. Have a good night. Oh, yikes. It's a big stretch of my hamstrings. Ah. Okay. Tell you what I'm going to do. Just a touch of shaking. No, I'm not going to shake. I'm going to. Yeah, that's better. I'm going to targeted shaking, basically. Slow. Man. Anyway, good night.